Hello and welcome to the 6th installment of Critical Mission, where we take you through the important events in the gaming landscape and look at topics relevant to the interactive industry today. This week we have a very special episode in light of the May 21st Xbox press event that took place. So without further ado, my name is Felix Dejean, I'm your host, and with me this week I have two Canadian co-hosts, namely Kevin Zepik and Roark Suter. Welcome, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, hello.
I'm glad to have you here and have you with us because we've got the new Xbox, the new generation revealed, which is revealed to be the Xbox One. And before we even get into what was announced, what was shown, and what was being talked about, I think one question that most people came away from watching that event had was, who exactly is Microsoft talking to with the Xbox One? Now, what would you say to that, Roark?
I definitely feel that the entire conference centered around the Western market. Definitely with things like the fantasy sports and like a lot of the ESPN packages, Call of Duty. I feel like that's all definitely directly applicable to mainly the Western market. As far as the fantasy sports stuff goes, that's actually been getting pretty big. I mean, if you look at the actual numbers for what those different systems are getting, it's been steadily increasing, and I think, fantasy sports players are up to 35 million people at this point in time, and it's just been growing over the past 4 years by 60%. So that's obviously a portion of the market they're directly going for, but it definitely centered around the Western market as a whole.
Would you agree with that, Kevin?
Yeah, well, Microsoft has been targeting the Western market primarily for years, ever since they had such a huge failure in Japan. But this especially was targeting the more casual Xbox gamer, like the dude bros that buy Madden and Call of Duty, and not so much the hardcore gamers. Like, I think that they're sort of taking the hardcore gamers for granted and not really gearing this press conference to them, thinking like, okay, we've got the gamers, we've had the gamers for years, they'll buy the system no matter what, who cares, let's go for these casual people that are more interested in watching TV on their Xbox and fantasy football and the latest EA Sports offerings. And I think that is probably the biggest mistake they made out of all of the missteps at this press conference, because the people that are going to buy this system at the end of this year when it releases are the hardcore gamers and people that early adopt new technology. And
right, but they said before it started, though, they a couple of days before, they said this would be primarily a hardware reveal and a feature reveal. It was about entertainment. They already announced that the games would be shown at E3 primarily.
Yeah, well, that's why I do cut them a little bit of slack. Like, I'm not going to condemn them completely until after E3, until we get to see like what they've kept for the gamers. But I still think there was room for them to put a couple of nods to the people that are actually going to go buy these systems this year. I mean, in the end, I think 3-4 years from now, we're going to look back and Xbox is going to be at that point winning the console race. They are much more in the minds of the casual audience than Sony is, and they are much better geared towards the casual the casual gamers and the casual consumers. And I think monetary wise, that is going to lead them to a better victory overall than over Sony. But as a hardcore gamer, this press conference was severely disappointing. And the fact that, it's the fact that it was so centric on all these ancillary features as opposed to what the system has always been, and that's a game console. Like, that's what brought it to the market. Like, that is what made They didn't make all that money selling, a box to watch TV on. They made a game console. The Xbox is where it is because of gamers, and I feel like pushing them so far off to the side was a big mistake on their part.
That is true, but we need to switch gears here a little bit because we need to remember the mindset that Microsoft is actually in, which has always been that the Xbox and the Xbox brand has only been a Trojan horse in order for Microsoft to dominate the living room, so to speak. That has always been their plan, and it's fairly well known. So while I do agree with what you're saying here, essentially being that it seems like they left out their primary market, which is to say that the gamers put the Xbox in the living room, so to speak. They also seem to very clearly differentiate between what they were talking about on May 21st and what they're going to be delivering at E3, which is a games-oriented event for the most part, heavily games-oriented. We would all agree.
I feel like this console. Sorry, did you respond there to Ian's point?
Well, I'm just going to say that if it's games that we want to play, I mean, Microsoft has set themselves up to really win over gamers. But if they show us a lot of gaming content, that we want, a lot of big surprises, I think they've set themselves up to have a really, really good E3. But if they come out and show us a lot of the stuff they've been showing us the last 2 or 3 years, with heavy emphasis on this Kinect shovelware and that, they risk losing the gamers like completely.
Yeah, and we'll get to talk more about Kinect as we kind of venture on in the program. But touching on what was being said there, it's clear that the games we're gonna touch on what was being talked about there later on in the program. But it's clear that games are mostly in the E3 mindset, and this was, of course, the reveal event, and wanted to show off the hardware, show off the specs, and talk a little about what the hardware and the console itself would be able to do above and beyond games, so to speak. But another thing I wanted to bring up, being that so many things and so many ancillary things were being brought up at the press conference itself, was this concept that Microsoft brought forward that they call instant switching, which seemingly allows Xbox One users to switch between services on the fly, with seemingly little to no delay in multitasking. And there's this snap mode, which allows multiple programs to run alongside each other without canceling one another out. And there's this smart glass functionality, which essentially allows you to control your Xbox via your tablet or a smartphone device. And with all this being announced, as well as having Skype, it seemed very indicative of everything pointing towards what I was referring to before with Microsoft using the Xbox brand as a Trojan horse in order to dominate the living room, and essentially creating what now seems like a living room PC. Now, as well as judging by the x86 architecture and the features available that they've been talking about, do you feel that this is necessarily true, or do you feel that this is only one aspect that they're pushing?
So, I think this console is a direct response to things like Apple TV. I mean, they're obviously fighting quote unquote, fighting the console war, but they're also vying for control, as Ian said, for the living room, and their direct opposition to that would be definitely Apple TV. Now, I think Microsoft is looking really good to capture a big portion of the market because of the different sporting packages that they're offering, and because of all these different implementations of sports stuff, as well as it being a hard gaming console. I think that that will do well for them going forward, because of the fact that it is both a hard gaming console and that media device that controls everything that people seem to look for these days.
Yeah, the multimedia stuff and the instant switching that they showed us at the press conference, it looked like it worked really well. And when the console comes out, if it works as advertised, I think it will be a good addition to the console. I don't think it's something that is really going to be a huge selling feature, but
Well, it's definitely a problem now. I mean, if you try to boot up Netflix or any app on the Xbox 360 now, it takes, I don't know, like sometimes 20, 30 seconds and can be kind of frustrating. So that's definitely something.
that's true. And there has been a lot of cases. Like I don't use my consoles so much for extra features like that, but even so much as going to look at something on the home menu, even on like the PlayStation as well as the Xbox. If you're in a game or if you're in a movie or something like that and you want to just check something on the home menu, it means stopping what you're doing and having to quit out, go to the menu, and it does sometimes take 30 seconds, 60 seconds to quickly look up what you wanted to look up and get back to what you were doing. So this ability to do kind of a picture-in-picture type thing where you can use multiple features of the console at once does look like it will actually be pretty useful, and it looks like it will be, I think it would be a big part of their success if they can show us more ways to use this as opposed to just, they showed us a Skype call, they showed us being able to look up stuff on the movies. They didn't show us anything relating to gaming with it. They did show us that you can switch instantly between a game and a movie and stuff like that. But I mean, really, how often are you playing a game and then all of a sudden you're like, I have to see what's on TV right now, and like want to switch instantly to your TV, and then I gotta go back to my game. So
Well, you can pull up things like strategy guides or I don't know, stuff like that, Easter egg videos.
well,
Or...
yeah, that's why I do question whether or not all of these will be available with gaming, because games are so much more system intensive than running a movie. So the console may not be capable of running all these different applications at once while you're in a game that's using up like a lot of the system memory. But that's all speculation, so we'll kind of put that aside for now. The smart glass stuff, though, we have smart glass right now, and it does do some of these features already. It does allow you to control various aspects of your 360 with your mobile phone, and it works. I would imagine that they've retooled it for the new system and that it will probably work a lot better. And while not not like a selling feature, like that's being able to connect your smartphone to your Xbox One is not something that's going to sell systems, but it is a nice thing to have if you have the system, especially when it comes to searching the web or something like that. As someone that has tried to search for things on Xbox and PS, like the PS3 internet, using your controller to surf the web is fucking terrible. So being able to use
even if you have one of those little type pad
so just having an
shit.
on-screen touch interface keyboard will make miles of difference, as opposed to trying to use your controller or wave your arms around like a lunatic trying to get like the Kinect gestures to work.
And it doesn't substitute your regular controller as well, so it actually solves that competitive problem that Microsoft would have had if they had not had some other way of controlling those ancillary features, essentially.
Yes, because controlling a movie with your Xbox controller or with your PlayStation controller is, it's a pain in the ass. Like you have to remember what all the buttons on your controller do. Otherwise, you're just kind of, going through menus by accident, starting, stopping, pausing it when you don't mean to. Whereas with a smart glass, with something on your phone, it can like visibly have like a remote control layout with like a pause button and a fast forward button and a menu button and all that. So I think smart glass will be, it's going to be good to have. It'll be good to see what they've improved upon what they already have with the Xbox 360.
Yeah, and it will definitely be interesting to see what else they can come up with, and we'll, of course, know more come E3. But let's talk about the console itself. Now, we've talked a little about it in general terms, but let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. Now, Microsoft were very, very quick to announce the console when they were doing their press event, and quickly thereafter, I think it was Mark. I'm failing on his name, but Mark
Mark
the
Whitten.
Mark Whitten, exactly. Thank you for that. Came out and basically gave a general outline of the system's capability in advance, which was basically to say that it's going to be an 8-core x86 based CPU architecture with an 8 GB DDR. And it was later found out that the 8 GB RAM was DDR3. They did not announce that at the press conference itself. With a 500 GB internal hard drive, Blu-ray disc drive, and a USB 3 port. Now, with the Xbox One also, sporting this x86 architecture, it kind of seems like the days of purely having, your dedicated game console like you did with the original Xbox or with the PS2 or the PS1 and all these older consoles, it really seems like there is an increased push towards making these newer consoles more general purpose than before, especially with the x86 architecture, essentially making both these gaming, primarily next generation gaming consoles, more akin to PCs than the gaming behemoths that they were previously. Now, and as we just touched upon with the Xbox, it's got these different features as far as smart glass, as far as snap mode, and you can search the internet, and you can do all these things, even some of it being voice driven. Now, and you were talking about before, Rourke, about how they were trying to capture the Western audience and going for a broader appeal. Now, with these features, and Kevin very much harping on the fact that Microsoft did not show very much that was specifically gaming related, do you think that this is indicative or a necessary push from them, turning to multi-purpose functionality for their consoles in order to justify new consumer purchases of new consoles, given that you can only push uh, the hardware on a console so far without incurring extraordinary losses?
Well, I think another big part of it is the fact that production of a game today is more expensive than it's ever been. It takes enormous teams to make these AAA games, and moving to an architecture that game developers are far more familiar with, being like the x86 PC-based architecture, makes it a lot easier to make games for these consoles. That is why Sony made a big deal about announcing they were going to x86 after the huge disaster that they had with the PS3 architecture. So, Xbox is just kind of following suit. I think both companies have decided they're going to try and make it easier on developers, because if you're going to make things a pain in the ass for people to develop for, there's less likelihood that they're going to put out a quality experience on your system. I mean, if we look back at this generation, the Xbox 360 games, when it comes to third-party releases anyways, throughout the console's history, the 360 games have outperformed PS3 games, despite the fact that the PS3 has far better hardware under the hood, because of just the cell architecture and how terrible it was to program games for. So that issue has resulted in a lot more people buying games on 360 as opposed to buying games on PS3. That's why most of the games that I own are on 360 rather than PS3, because the 360 versions typically run better. So now that you're going to like a parity where you're making it easier for the developers to make these games across all platforms, and there's people are going to be more likely to buy your copy because they know it's going to be as good as anyone else's. You're not going to have to worry about people jumping ship to the other guys or buying it on PC, because the Xbox will have a quality gaming experience. It won't be bogged down by architecture problems. So I think that is a big part of why they've gone to this move. Um, Another big part of it probably is the fact that yes, with Netflix coming out in the last few years and all these other stuff like Hulu and the introduction of applications on the consoles where you can stream videos and connect to sports and connect to like UFC. I think more people are doing more things in their living room with their consoles than ever before. So having a PC architecture running your system will make that transition a lot easier and make it a lot easier for other people to develop software to make your box more than it started out to be.
That thing is a tank, though. It's huge. The console itself.
But would you agree with what Kevin said here, Roark?
Yeah, I think so for the most part. I mean, yeah, the streamlined development cycle is personally exciting. I think ultimately we'll find better titles come from this more unified architecture among all consoles, excluding the Wii U, I guess. Will hopefully make for some better titles. That's what I'm hoping for, anyway.
And actually, to Roark's point about the box, yeah, the box is massive. Like that is a 1980s looking piece of hardware. Aesthetically, it looks fine, but that was a big part of Microsoft's press conferences, was getting that box, showing us the box within, I think, like the first. They spent the first few minutes.
Seconds.
Well, they spent the first few minutes doing just a quick little overview of like what Xbox has done over its past 10-year history or so, or longer than that now, I guess. But yeah, they wasted no time in showing us the physical box as kind of a sort of like a one-up to Sony, where we still have not even seen what the PS4 looks like, other than a video that kind of gave us some little close-up shots of various parts of it, which made no freaking sense.
That's true, but you also have to contend with the fact that given that some of the hardware specifications for the PS4 was specifically the DDR5 8 gigabytes of RAM, I'm wondering if the PS4 won't be of a similar magnitude in order to be able to recoup costs, so to speak, because I don't think that any of these two companies can necessarily make their consoles any smaller as far as the physical size without incurring extra losses as well. So I think the physical look of it is purely out of not wanting to spend too much there in order to be able to more easily recoup losses.
I'm sure there'll be an Xbox One Slim out at some point too, and just like with every console generation.
Pretty much, there's almost like historically always been two SKUs released.
But I'm not sure if this would actually fit in my TV cabinet right now. I don't think it would fit at all.
Size wise, I bet you're right. We're probably going to see something similar from Sony. The whole act of seeing the console and around the gaming industry, that was sort of one of the big things. Was like even before the Xbox event started, are we going to see what the console physically looks like? Yeah. And I've never understood what the big deal is with seeing the actual console itself. Because
it's important to consumers.
Well, I could honestly, for me, I could care less. Like the Xbox 360 to this day still looks like just a horrible, ugly, stupid-looking box to me. Like maybe not as much as the Xbox One that was a big ugly X with a big green circle in the middle. So, aesthetics for a console are not, they're not terribly high up on my list of priorities. So, I mean, as long as it's not like bright pink with flowers growing out of the top of it, I could really care less what the system looks like.
Right, but it's important to underline the fact here that you're not talking about a specific audience at all. You're actually talking about consumers in general and what drives consumer behavior. And it's very simple marketing terms as far as if you see what somebody is trying to sell you, you will
Yeah.
have a much easier time to picture yourself buying it. As stupid as that sounds, that is unfortunately how like most humans work. If we see something, it's much easier to envision ourselves having that or using that. And with Microsoft kind of getting that into consumers' minds, even though reception has been divisive on the
Hmm.
press conference itself, I think it was an important move that, uh, for better or for worse, Sony left out of their press conference. With that being said, I think we've spent a little time on the hardware, and another important part of the hardware that they touted was the Kinect 2. I'm not sure that they're referencing it as Kinect 2.0, but it's definitely Kinect, and it's definitely new and improved. Now, they were talking about, in relation to the Skype feature that you mentioned earlier, Kevin, that the new Kinect camera is going to have a 1080p camera with a expanded field of view, and its software has been updated for better body tracking. And in fact, the Kinect can track details so finally that it can monitor your heart rate for fitness games and so on, and even gave journalists and people from tech media a tryout of the new camera and saw it in action. And from what we've seen, I would say that it looks fairly impressive. Um, and it's also very important to note that they said that the microphone has also been improved with advanced noise isolation, and very importantly, the console itself will not run with Kinect unplugged, but they also specified that Kinect would be bundled in with every new Xbox One. Now, with that being said, and what you've seen and what we know of the previous console generations, Kinect and the physical motion outings that there've been in the aftermath of what was the Nintendo Wii. What was your general impressions of the new Kinect and the improvements that have been made to it, Kevin?
Well, I think we've finally gotten the Kinect that they promised us 3 years ago. The original Kinect at this point now it just seems kind of like a beta, like a tech demo they released to everybody so they could work on this Kinect that supposedly actually works. From what I've seen, from what they showed off in the press conference and some of the after show stuff with Jeff Keighley on GT and that, it does look a lot more impressive using an IR camera to better differentiate motion and differentiate people's bodies regardless of light levels. There was talk of the fact that it is a much better judge of your surroundings regardless of the size of your room. So it sounds like that restriction where you had to have Kinect in a big huge room otherwise it didn't work, like that might have been taken care of as well, which like even if the original Kinect had worked, even if there was compelling software for it, I couldn't buy it because of where my Xbox 360 is in my house. My living room's not big enough for me to own a Kinect. So that was always kind of a sour point to me with the whole Kinect system. So seeing that they've addressed that stuff is good. There seems to be a lot more detailed motion tracking in response to individual, like your hands, and there's the skeletons that the Kinect creates based on your bodies and your movements seem a lot more detailed. One thing I was actually really disappointed with was they showed like sort of the Kinect and how it's one-to-one sort of response based on, they did some like yoga poses and stuff like that up on the screen. It would have been a lot more impressive if they actually had somebody live on stage doing that and showed us sort of in real time. I mean, because just showing us a video can be faked. Like, they could just be showing us best case scenario. The stuff with Jeff Keighley live from Xbox trying it out was far more impressive demonstration of what the Kinect could do than the stuff they showed on stage live to like the entire world. So I think that was a bit of a misstep right there.
That's true, but isn't that true for most press conferences? You don't generally want to try out a lot of this stuff on stage in case it goes wrong, and the internet is always very quick to catch you falling on your
Yeah,
face.
Yeah, we don't want another
old
Skittles
person.
scenario, but we just even a very short demo, like because They could have just done the exactly what they showed us on the screen live, and it would have been a little more impressive. And then there's always the talk of the always on Connect that will watch you and listen to you even when the console's turned off.
Always
But
watching.
that's a very interesting point you go into there. The fact of this always on Connect. That's something that people get very up in arms about, especially in the aftermath of the press conference. But I do wonder about how seriously people take these things, considering the fact that there's been several lawsuits towards rather big mobile companies surrounding the fact that they've been listening in on their conversations and so forth. And what exactly are the parameters for what it can track and what it can see and what it stores as well as what it delivers back to Microsoft. Now, with these things not exactly being uncovered, it does seem, and of course, I'm not saying this is unjustified at all, but it does seem people are jumping the gun just a little bit considering how vague some of these things that were being reported are. For example, just to mention another thing, the whole secondhand used game scenario likewise was very unclear, and the
Yeah.
reporting thereon didn't exactly make it even more clear. So that's one of the things where I'm wondering, you know, do like we will probably hear some more about that come either E3 or another event, but it definitely seems to me like that's one of the things that have been blown out of proportion. I don't know if you would agree.
I think like the always watching you, always watching your movement stuff. I mean, I like everyone do stuff in my living room that nobody needs to know about, right? um, but I don't know. I think it's just born out of fun sci-fi sort of
Orwellian.
hyperbole. I guess just an exaggeration of what's possible. Obviously, there's some like underlying fear that it could watch you, but I don't think it's real or founded among a lot of people. Um, I mean, it's obviously something to be aware of, but I think it's more like that sci-fi, just sort of, yeah, that's the future, man. It's gonna be always watching us, Big Brother. Um, but as far as the whole used game secondhand sales thing goes, I don't understand why Microsoft even brought that up at all. If they weren't ready to talk about used games, I don't think they should have mentioned it.
I
They
think they were
tried.
specifically
Well,
asked by the games press about that. But
oh,
we
okay.
should probably save that for the games section because I have a feeling we will definitely have enough to talk about there, and
Well,
that should definitely be there.
I know Major Nelson issued that some company stance to try and clarify Microsoft's like used game stuff, but it does not help at all if you've read the quote. It goes, the ability to trade in and resell games is important to gamers and to Xbox. Xbox One is designed to support the trade-in and resale of games. Reports about our policies for trade-in and resale are inaccurate and incomplete. We will disclose more information in the near future. So, obviously that doesn't tell us a whole lot.
No, but once again, that kind of comes from the gaming press, talking
Yeah.
to individual executives
Yeah,
after
right.
the show. So it's
Yeah.
kind of
So it'll
you
just
get
be
the
something we'll have to look for clarification in the future.
yeah, and we can all
But I mean, people just always love to speculate and get real pessimistic about this stuff, which is fine. But um, I'd like to hear more information, definitely,
yeah, we can
before
talk
I
about
start.
more about it in the game section, but for now,
Yeah, sure.
let's move on. Now, the other thing that was very interesting about Kinect is this functionality that has been in the Kinect for quite a while, and while we did see the Microsoft's tagline for Kinect being in the previous generation, the current generation, so to speak, being better with Kinect. Now, here they didn't address any Kinect usage with games, but one thing that was very focused on from the beginning of the Kinect presentation during the press conference was the fact that you will be able to talk to your Xbox and tell it to do things in the same way that Kevin was talking about smart glass and how that's immediately integrated into the touchpad experience. Now you also have this phonetic layer that is much more detailed, seemingly, from the presentation that they gave with the Kinect on stage. Now, with that kind of functionality, I don't know if we saw a whole lot of that behind the scenes, or that journalists got hands-on experience with it afterwards. But to me, that was probably one of the more interesting things, along with the ease of use with Kinect as far as hand gestures go. Being able to talk to your Kinect is very interesting to me because it kind of makes the interface very easy for well, shall we say the less controller savvy people out there. And that really interests me because it looks as if now Kinect has been both updated and upgraded and kind of retooled in order to work for a broader audience. But I wonder, just as well as Roark said, since it was geared very much towards a Western audience, are we going to have a similar situation in which Kinect will only be used by Americans or people with very not heavy accents? Do you see any
Uh,
of that?
Apple's been able to get Siri, their voice recognition software, to work in various places around the world. Like when Siri launched, it launched in the UK, it launched in Australia, and I think since then they've moved it out to some other countries. So I think it's more of a lot of the features of this box seem to be US only upon launch, and then they'll roll it out to other countries afterwards, especially since Microsoft, being an American company, being a very heavily Western focused market for the Xbox. So the voice command stuff, again, also being another product of the always on, so that you can turn your Xbox on at any time just by saying Xbox on and the various other voice commands. Again, another holdover from the last Kinect. The last Kinect allowed us to do searches, to launch apps, to play launch games and stuff like that through voice commands. And probably one of my favorite stories coming out of this press event, the Xbox, the live press event was, it was streamed online. It was streamed. It was shown on Spike TV in the States, and it was also streamed live to anybody who wanted to watch it on their Xbox 360s. And almost every single person with an Xbox 360 whose Kinect was on had connection problems, because every time they would do Xbox commands during the press conference, it would turn their Xboxes off or disconnect their Xboxes because their Kinect is picking up the sound from the press conference. So, I don't think we're really there in a world of of total voice command integration with Xbox, with the Kinect with your Xbox, because what's stopping an Xbox commercial from, especially if you're watching TV on your Xbox, what's stopping an Xbox commercial from, saying a couple of words in it, just happenstance, that, happens to turn your Xbox off or launch something unintentionally? Or
But wasn't that primarily when I think it was Yusuf Mehdi, Microsoft's chief, I think it was their primary Xbox experience guy, for lack of a better term, he said Xbox go home. Wasn't that when the application then on the original Xbox with the Kinect tied to it then reverted back to the main menu?
Yeah, and that's still, the sort of the command they use for going home in that one. But they have other ones like Xbox TV, Xbox Search. I mean, Xbox TV, I can, maybe not in a commercial where Microsoft has control over every word that's said, but if you're watching TV on, say, your Xbox One, and somebody happens to say Xbox and TV, like, those two words back to back in a sentence, like maybe an interview, maybe something else, and then, suddenly
Yeah,
your TV turns on, or your channel changes, or your TV turns off, or,
But the
that.
good thing about that is that it's all software, so that would be able to be patched out essentially.
Well, it needs a voice recognition. Like, uh it needs a function where it'll recognize the voice of everyone in your home, and not strange voices that it doesn't recognize, which is harder to implement, which is more work to implement, and which we may or may not see depending on glitches like that. I mean, something like this is few and far between, but when it does happen, especially during a big event like this, it was a pretty decent sized story right after the press event was over, that all these Xbox 360 users kept having their Kinects go haywire during the press conference.
But another good point is how often would that then happen? And especially since they now know about that pre-launch, is that really going to be an issue come launch? Is what I
yeah.
wonder
I mean,
about.
it's also something that, like Ian's saying, it's something that we have to see in practice. Which, just like the instant app launching, it's just something you have to like get a hold of yourself and be able to see, away from just like a Microsoft conference that is showing out the best qualities that they put out. Um, but yeah, it's just something I guess we'll have to see in practice, and it's not to see how well it actually works.
And it really depends on what these voice commands end up being, because if it's something simple, like, the simpler you make a voice command, the more likely it is something that's going to find its way into regular conversation. And another problem we potentially could see down the road is these always on connects, where even if your Xbox is turned off, your Kinect is always listening. So if you just happen to say the command that launches something, like launches Skype or launches, something on your Xbox is going to fire up, these programs going to launch, and you're going to have to go through the trouble of turning it back off again. And there at this point there doesn't really seem to be a workaround around that, because you must have your Kinect plugged in, turned on. Like, the Kinect will always be there. It will always be watching you. It'll always be listening. So, and at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a way around that.
Right, but they've also announced that they have these various modes of being for the Xbox Connect and the Xbox system in general. I mean, the Xbox One system specifically. So it's as of yet unclear what will work and when will it work. Hopefully, we'll get a better insight into that when we get to E3. But for now, we can only speculate as to what will the end user experience be, and of what kind of caliber and of what kind of grade will it be able to get to at the as of yet unannounced price point. But the next point we should probably be moving on to is another thing that proved to be a big talking point for Microsoft, and that was the live TV, which seems to be an extension of Xbox Live. Now, live TV is, as Microsoft put it, Microsoft's new TV-oriented service, which will only be available in the US at launch, with Microsoft expecting global scale over time, as they've said. But basically, it introduces a new kind of interactive television experience through the live TV overlay and the so-called Xbox One Guide, which is essentially a voice-controlled search and navigation mode, which also features such things as favorites and trending, which we know from a lot of other media platforms, which also are referenced to other TV platforms and DVRs and so on. Um, but channel and content selection, which oddly enough will still be largely dependent on the TV providers in your immediate area within the United States. Now, despite Microsoft still making a relatively big push for original content and programming, which we will get to, but with what they announced as far as live TV is concerned, now, do you think that their new push for an integrated television experience, as you were talking before about Roark, as far as fantasy football and that wider audience and Western audience appeal, do you think they will succeed in appealing to this wider audience with as much of an emphasis on a connected experience with those services familiar to you? I mean, through both your TV, through both of these different apps, which we're very used to now with both things like Hulu and Amazon Prime and all these other apps that we're very used to from our gaming consoles that we have now.
So I definitely think the Xbox One is going to sell a shitload. I see it as both the dedicated gaming console that Microsoft needs and the multimedia device that they also need to combat Apple, like I mentioned before. I think even if you're not a fan of things like fantasy sports, you might have friends that do. And you generally purchase a console based on friends' decisions. So if they capture a large part of that sports audience and then bring over some more people who are buying the console because of social reasons, I see this console selling a ton in the Western market, which is obviously directly what they're going for, as we talked about earlier.
One thing I need to quickly kind of mention, before we get Kevin's take on this, is that, of course, with this new rollout from Microsoft concerning TV, one thing they did specify was that despite Xbox One providing this live TV service, it does need basically an HDMI feed from another set-top box or a cable provider in order to provide you that television experience.
Yeah, but I still think this is the happy medium between deciding on getting something like an Apple TV or like another multimedia device like that.
Would you agree
Just
with that,
going
Kevin?
No.
No?
With the Xbox One box, yeah, that's really what it is, isn't it? One plus all the other boxes you have to plug into it anyways. The problem is having, they're going to have a service. If they're creating their own content and distributing it through this live TV service is fine. Okay, we're also going to talk about that a little bit later. The problem is with regular TV incoming. You're going to need an HD box, which most people today have for their cable. They have a digital box, and it already has a guide. It already has like a lot of these things that the Xbox is just also doing. So that's one thing. But the fact that most people that do have an HD box, like in most places, it's a PVR or a DVR or TiVo or whatever it happens to be called. The Xbox does not seem to support recording of television shows. So for that reason alone, a lot of people are not going to replace their current, cable box guide and all that with an Xbox One.
Have they disclosed that specifically, though?
They haven't, but being able to record live TV shows is a huge feature. The fact that it was completely just missing leads me to believe that it's either a problem where the Xbox, because you can't expect the Xbox to interface with every PVR on the market. I mean, the fact that the Xbox is taking the HDMI signal from your digital box and just pulling it through the Xbox and then allowing you to access it that way. The Xbox would have to be able to tell your DVR, PVR, whatever, what have you, to record these shows. So your Xbox would be controlling this other box to record all this TV for you. So the fact that they would have to be able to control all these different devices from all these different companies and manufacturers is, I don't see it happening. And just the fact that, being able to record television shows in this day and age has become such a huge deal. Most cable companies offer you free video recorders when you sign up for cable now. The fact that the Xbox is sort of going away from that, leads me to believe not a lot of people are really going to use this feature, because for instance myself, I'm the early adopters, especially people like me, people like us that buy early technology like this, that are more likely to have PVRs in their house and all these different types of media electronics. Like, I have not watched a live TV show in two and a half, 3 years, however long I've had my recorder. Every time I watch a TV show, it's recorded, and then I watch it later. So I can fast forward through commercials, so I can skip parts of it. Moving to this Xbox, sure, you can watch a live TV show through your Xbox, but why on earth would I want to do that when I have a superior device sitting next to it on my, that is required by the Xbox to still run?
But one thing I have to point out here is, like, since we're in the territory of speculation, another thing that one could inflect, given what Microsoft has announced, would also be the fact that these things might be running through the cloud. So if you record something as such, it would be forwarded to the cloud, and that would make sense in line with the always on policy, so to speak, if those two could connect instantly. So
I don't see it going to the cloud, because then you run into the whole sort of legal mess that is copyright protection for television shows and movies and stuff like that, where it was a while before PVRs and that could even really gain the ground that they did, due to issues with being able to just basically take TV shows and save them. The fact that you can record a TV show,
restricted to region, still restricted to regions.
Well, the reason PVRs work and are legal and they're perfectly fine is because it is pulled into a certain box. Without that box, you cannot watch those shows that you've recorded. Now that if you start sending stuff to the cloud, where that I can see that running into a lot of legal loopholes, and it becoming just a big mess that I don't think Microsoft would even really want a part of. And
I think those are some good points, but I just wanted to say that if a lot of these consumers already have the dedicated cable box, like you said, and you're looking at the next generation of consoles, and you see that this dedicated gaming console, the Xbox One, can offer you a more streamlined experience with your already existing hardware, your cable box, then why would you not go for that over, say, I don't know, like a different console that doesn't offer that same sort of experience with your cable box?
Well, if you just
something that you already have.
Well, if you just have digital cable, you have a box that gives you live TV shows and that. Then in that situation, I see the new Xbox One being like a big benefit. Having your gaming console will also be able to pull up your guide and your TV schedules and all that. But if you have a digital video recorder, if you have a device that allows you to record your shows, and I have to say, every single person I know has a PVR. Like, I do not know a single person that does not own one. And the fact that why would I want to use my Xbox to watch TV where I can just watch live shows when I can use my PVR and I can watch live shows, I can record live shows, I can play back shows I've recorded. So instantly the Xbox becomes inferior to a device that I've had sitting in my living room for 4 years now.
But it's interesting, you seem to be touching on the same point over and over again, and this idea of live TV only working for live TV. Now, let me put it to you this. What did they announce specifically about live TV? Did they say you would only be able to watch TV?
They should. Well, they showed.
And it would only be live?
They didn't. Well, they didn't specifically say you could only do this. You don't use the word only during a press conference.
No, I'm just trying to find the space that we're operating in here, because I'm trying to figure out what are they going to do and what can they do.
Well, recording live video is not hard technology. They've already announced a feature with gameplay where you can record live gameplay to your device so that you can be played back later, so it can be shared with friends.
Right.
So recording TV shows is the same
intrinsic.
thing, but the fact that it got no mention. There was nothing on screen. There was nothing mentioned in the press conference. There was nothing mentioned in any of the stuff afterwards. leads me to believe that that's not something you just gloss over. Recording television through your Xbox would be a big bullet point on the box. Recording TV would be a bigger one than watching TV, in my mind. So the
But
fact
we
that they
also have
don't,
to remember that we've only gotten the first tidbit, this first 60 minutes, as
well,
opposed to
I'd say
other
it's more
conferences
than
that
a
have
tidbit.
run
They
for
covered TV
2
for
hours.
well, they covered TV for over half the press conference.
That's
So
true,
that it's
because
more
it's
that
a
TV
feature,
was more than a
but we have
tidbit.
to also look at it in the light of what was being announced and in what time frame. And they specifically said, as to going back to the secondhand used games policy, that these things akin to that would be disclosed at a later date. And with E3 coming up, I'm kind of curious, how much do we know and how much, will we know coming into E3, even as far as television goes? Because another thing they were big on was I wouldn't say necessarily game centric, but we did see two pieces of game centric television programming. Namely, as part of its push into TV, Microsoft, announced that they teamed up with Steven Spielberg yet again to produce something Halo centric, and this time it was a Halo TV show, and which is presumably going to be broadcast through Xbox Live. And of course, there is this new Remedy game, which we will talk about a little later, called Quantum Break, that will also feature some kind of television experience.
Yeah, as far as the Halo TV series goes, it seemed kind of cool. I'm always a fan of well-presented science fiction with high production values. The woman announcing the series seemed to compare it to a lot of big names in TV right now, like Breaking Bad, Band of Brothers, Game of Thrones. So obviously that increases my expectations for the show, but it also helps that Spielberg is attached to this project. But then again, Crystal Skull, right?
Well, and also, I question how much he actually is attached to the project. He's been just sort of tacked on as a producer, so the amount of hands-on time Spielberg's going to have with this series is kind of questionable, especially if he gets attached to a big movie project. Like, how much of his time is he really going to spend on this Halo TV series that's only available on Xbox when, he might be in the middle of a $200-300 million movie production?
That's true, but once again, that's one of those things we will only know as we kind of step forward into the future.
Well, and Halo being the big franchise that it is, I'm sure Halo probably would make a pretty decent TV series, and it couldn't be any worse than Defiance. But this part of the press conference is sort of the one. This is the one that really kind of got under my skin. It wasn't as big of a deal as some of the other bits, but like they brought out Nancy Tellem, their new digital media president, who's also a former executive over at CBS. And after the Sony press conference, we had that idiot on Kotaku, I can't remember her name now, write that story about how there was no women on during the Sony press event, and how it was so sexist of Sony not to put any women out there. So what does Xbox do? Well, we got to one-up Sony. Let's bring out two women, have them both on stage at the same time. So
I think that's kind of a strange point to make, in the fact that, especially as you point out, that Nancy Tellem used to work at fairly high up at CBS,
yes,
so
but
she does carry some credibility, and I do get where you're coming from, but I kind of lack the perspective to see, how this would necessarily one-up Sony, other than in a kind of gesture of being a
Weird.
more, diversified company.
well, it's just the bringing her out was just patronizing of some of Microsoft executives. It was because all she did was come out to make just a gloss over the announcement and bring out somebody else to talk about what she was talking about. Like, I had no problem with them bringing out Bonnie Ross, who is the head over at 343. I had no problem with bringing her out to talk about the Halo TV series, and like that was fine. That I had no problem with. But the fact that they brought out Nancy, I can speculate all this. In my opinion, they brought her out just so they could have an extra woman up on stage as just sort of a little kick at Sony. It's never really going to get brought up. We're never going to see big stories about it, and we'll never know like 100% whether that's true or not. But that's just something that did get under my skin a bit, because it seemed very transparently like, this is the only reason that she's really up here.
But at the same time, you could say that about Sony, or inflect that, oh, they're a Japanese company. Oh, there's only men on stage. It seems a very strange point to make.
At Sony's E3 conference, they're just gonna wheel out a dude in a wheelchair. He'll, I don't know, he'll just get to be this increasingly one-up ridiculousness.
No, they'll have the dog from
who
Call
can
of
find
Duty.
the more diverse...
I mean, you could make the same point about Steven Spielberg. He was essentially just there to say, "Hey, I'm behind this," and that's it.
He was there.
He was still there for like
that's all he
30, maybe 20 seconds. Not all that comparable to actually having a physical presence.
No, he was there just to lay credence to. It's like, okay, we're making a Halo TV series. I'm like, okay, whatever. Steven Spielberg is going to be a part of it. Oh, this sounds a little more legitimate than it was before.
And you could say the same thing about Microsoft's original Xbox programming in bringing Nancy Tellem, since she was a fairly high executive at CBS, so she does have some credence and credibility to bring to the Xbox team, I would imagine.
Well, then they should have had something for her.
Although I definitely think she was the weakest speaker.
I mean, the fact that she was not utilized at all in the press conference is why I bring this up. If she had came out and announced some big thing, then fine, whatever. But the fact that she only came out to basically announce Bonnie Ross of 343 so that she could announce that they're doing Halo with Steven Spielberg and all that seems like just a big waste of...
Doesn't actually the more you talk about it, the more I think it actually makes sense, in the sense that you have Nancy Tellem of CBS, you have Bonnie Ross of 343, and you have Steven Spielberg behind it, and just lends more credence and credibility to the fact that a Halo TV series made by the Xbox team, as it were, will actually produce something of a certain degree of quality. So I have to admit,
CBS has got all sorts of quality programming.
While I do see the point you're trying to make, I don't think it is especially strong in the case that you're making. But with that being said, I think with that we can kind of leave the live TV portion of our program and kind of move over into something that is starting to get more games related, and that was the talk about Xbox Live and how that has been revamped for the next generation now. They mentioned that Xbox Live has been improved for Xbox One, and now that downloaded games can be installed in segments so you can play them faster, akin to what we also heard from Sony during the PS4 press conference. Background update, downloads, game saves, and profiles, plus entertainment content, music, TV shows, and movies can be saved in the cloud. And they were also talking about something that was a very large sticking point to some, and it had been speculated as to whether or not how much carryover there would be from the Xbox 360 going over to the Xbox One. Now, one of these sticking points with the Xbox Live is that membership from Xbox Live Gold for 360 will also transfer over to the Xbox One. So far, at least, without any pricing or raise of the price point has been mentioned, it seems like that service will carry on so far. And of course, gamer score and achievements will also carry over to the Xbox One's version of Xbox Live. And their achievement system is going to be expanded now with records of what you do, adding new achievements and objectives over time. But of course, some of these things will not carry over, such as avatars as we have them today on the Xbox Live. And as Kevin was saying before, the inbuilt game DVR now records your gameplay and saves this footage to the cloud, and it comes complete with sharing tools. Now, I don't believe we saw any of that at the actual press conference, but it was one of the bullet points that was being talked about both at the press conference and in the aftermath of the press conference. And of course, this adds a bit of a of a spectator ability to the whole recording of gameplay footage. And of course, there were talks about competitive elements and how these can be used to track and shadow other players' performance in order to study them and so forth, and a new matchmaking tool, as well as talking about now how Skype has been integrally redesigned for Xbox One, and basically to take Connect advantage of Connect and these new HD features, which also, which they made a big deal out of, allows for group calls. Now, whether or not this will be exclusive to Xbox Live Gold as such, or if it will be available to the silver tier, or whether or not those tiers will still carry over, has not really been disclosed, but that is what they announced at the press conference itself. Now, of course, before we go into even more of the nitty gritty of what this means, I want to, of course, get your impressions as you watch the press conference. What do you think of this new revamped Xbox Live service? I know we didn't see a whole lot, but at least we saw some of what contained the user interface.
So this sort of gets into what I'm most excited for in the new console generation as a whole. I'll just make this brief point of saying that I am incredibly excited to see just overall the improvement in online architecture for these different services. I'm hoping that this rallies in a new sort of broadening of possibly internet architecture as well, which will be completely awesome. That's the biggest thing that I'm most excited for with the new wave of consoles. But specifically to Xbox, to the new Xbox Live experience, yeah, it seems cool. It will be curious to see if it will still be a paid service, considering the state of broadband and internet at the beginning of Xbox 360 cycle and the distance it's come now by the time the Xbox One comes out. I definitely think it was a necessary move to continue with your old profile. That was obviously a necessity in order to retain some loyalty within your customer base. That's definitely a plus. I mean, if you've had like a profile for, sorry, how long the Xbox been out?
7 years, I think.
7 years? Yeah, if you've had like this profile that you've sort of created for 7 years, I could definitely see some attachment to that, and some want to maybe continue on that persona. Yeah, so I'm just excited for improvements across the board, hopefully, in online gaming, because that is one of the things I'm into. That's probably my biggest thing in gaming right now is multiplayer, so yes.
I was excited by all the stuff they announced. I was glad to see that your current Xbox account is going to carry over, because it's signing up for a new account, especially like I've had my account for 6 years, so having to sign up for a new account, start all over again with all that is a lot more hassle than I think it would have been worth. So I was glad to see that all that carries over. I'm glad to see that they're expanding the achievement section, because achievements right now, some of them are really good, and some game developers get really creative, while some other ones give you achievements like, hey, you beat chapter 1, here's 20 gamer score. Like some developers really phone it in. So it's good to see that the ones that do get a bit more creative are going to have a little more leeway, and to challenge you to, and for you also to be able to share those achievements with your friends. The other stuff that was announced, most of it is stuff that you'd kind of expect with a new console generation. The better matchmaking. Some of the matchmaking has always been kind of suspect. a lot of that also depends on the games, because some games run off servers, some run through Xbox Live. Um, for the most part, I was excited by the stuff they showed. Um, I think it's kind of interesting that they glossed over the sharing features. Uh, you like considering how big of a point Sony made it to for
Well,
all
it
of the
was only
sharing.
an hour long
It is, but
conference.
like it's they did hit it. They did say that a lot of the stuff that we saw with the PS4 we're also going to be able to do on our Xbox, which we kind of expected anyways. Since then, we've also heard more features upon that, like the ability to take control of a friend's game through Skype has been announced. I think just yesterday. So we're going to hear probably more about that on E3, especially from the looks of it being E3 being much more gaming centric for Microsoft. So I imagine the game sharing is something we'll probably see a lot more of there. Um, but with the Xbox Live stuff, I don't doubt that it's paid. I would I would put anything down right now on it being a paid service. I think the only
Yeah.
real question is going to be what you get for your paid service and what you get for a not paid service. With this console being always on, connected, and all that, um,
And of
there's
course, what the new price point might be.
well, yeah, not so much the price point. I don't see them charging too much more than they're already currently charging us for Xbox Live. But
Well, if they're putting
the
out,
fact that your console has to be connected all the time for all these things to work, I'm questioning whether or not you're even going to be able to use your Xbox without paying for Xbox Live Gold. Like if there's even going to be a silver level like we saw in this generation, or if it's just a mandatory, you have to pay us $5 a month, $10 a month, or else your console doesn't work.
I think it's probably going to end up being probably more of a tiered service in the sense that
Yeah.
going by the output that they've announced that they're going to be bringing to the console itself, it does sound like what they put in as far as the TV side, of course, Microsoft being a very, very large company and worth a lot of money, I don't think they'd be afraid of making any investment whatsoever if they were confident within it. But of course, at the end of the day, they also have to justify the fact that this console is going to have to end up in a lot of homes and bring some of that, loss incurred back into the black. And with that being said, the great thing about the current generation of consoles for Microsoft was that they were solid with Xbox Live. They knew that they offered a service that people would pay for, and people did pay for it. I think out of an install base of 76 million consoles, you have 46 million live subscribers, Xbox Live Gold subscribers. So obviously there's a market for them and that type of content that Microsoft wants to bring. The question is, with all this added content, can they then justify to themselves only selling it at how much is it at now?
I
Before
think it's $60 a year.
$60 a year, so that would be $5 a month, right?
Yeah.
So, are we going to see a new subscription tier where it's at $10 a month? $15 a month? What does that get you? Does that get you your own server? What does that get you? I'm only purely speculating here, but it does sound like they're making so many big bets that they cannot allow themselves to get caught up in giving free stuff away that, say, Sony was. You could always argue this, but Sony definitely didn't have that service that allowed them to recuperate the costs lost on their online infrastructure with the PS3. And it seems like with all the content that Microsoft is looking to bring to the Xbox One, that I would be very surprised if it just stays at $5 a month, but I would be equally surprised if they chose to implement a mandatory a service. Say you have bought this console for, I don't know, $400, let's say, and then you need to pay us whether you like it or not. I definitely think that if they chose to implement such a service, that it would not be favorable with the consumer, but the consumer would be understanding if they bought a device but weren't but did not have to pay a subscription. That was their choice after having bought the console.
Well, I think it'll be if they do go. I guess they can't take all functionality away from the device without a live subscription, but I can see them pretty much stripping it to its bare bones, where it'll connect to the internet to authenticate your games, and that's it. You can't play much like it is today with silver and gold. You can't play online. You can't access apps. You can't access these Xbox Live TV offerings that they're going to be doing. So, but everybody that buys a console new will get a month, 2 months, 3 months of free gold membership, so you can try it out and see what you're missing, which is like what they currently do now. The one thing I don't see them locking away the TV stuff, like the Halo stuff, behind a higher tier. I can see them doing. The only thing I could see is that we might see Xbox Live go up a little bit, maybe go up to $70 or $80 a year. But I could see them implementing something akin to PlayStation Plus, where you can pay extra and we will give you extra things. Like you will get free games every month. You will get, bonus stuff that doesn't, you will get like bonuses like beyond what a regular subscriber would get, but the regular subscribers aren't really missing out on anything. There's not content that they couldn't get. Like they're not like, say, missing out on the Halo TV series, but they may not get whatever. So like the last Assassin's Creed game, like an Assassin's Creed game from 3 years ago for free or something like that, like the PlayStation Plus has done.
Or perhaps more. They also Microsoft also has or rather, they have bought in recent years a bunch of indie studios. Now, one, as you mentioned, that kind of very PS Plus like service. I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps we saw ports of previous games that have been successful on the Xbox 360 being ported over to um, the Xbox One in kind of an attempt to do something akin to that. It would be a very kind of attractive offer if they said we know we have these very high profile, well, not high profile, but critically acclaimed titles, right, from the previous generation. If you if you subscribe for $10 or 7, 8, whatever the price point would be, you would be able to play these or have these, or you would get these essentially. And I definitely do see a point to that. So in effect, it would be kind of a higher tier without being a higher tier.
Well, there's also the case that the Xbox One is also not backwards compatible in any way, shape, or form. So if you want to play 360 games on your Xbox One, you're out of luck. You have to keep your old 360 plugged in and play them on there. Whereas with Sony, we've seen them offer that, we haven't got the details of it, but they said they're going to offer legacy titles through Gaikai in that. So
And they haven't said what the titles are yet.
No, but an Xbox Plus, we'll call it, say like a highest tier, might offer a feature where it's like, okay, we have here's Halo 4 from Xbox 360 as a downloadable Xbox Live. You can buy it on Xbox Live for $20 to play it on your Xbox One, or if you're a highest tier subscriber, we just give it to you for free. Situations like that where, because I would guarantee we're going to see some older titles get re-released for these new consoles so that we can play them on the new consoles, much like we've seen this generation with HD releases, so that we could play our PS1 and PS2 games on 360 and PS3. I would guarantee we do see some things carry up to the next generation, and that might be something that Microsoft would be willing to give away to free to people who are giving them an extra $10 a month, say, for a high tier Xbox Live membership.
That's true, but I think that is gonna cut it for us in the realm of speculation as far as Xbox Live goes. There's a lot of unexplored territory there, and we will definitely have to get back to it once E3 is here and we're actually able to comment on what some of the facts are when we get them. But this brings us to a very interesting section, which is probably the most talked about section, for better or worse, around the internet following the press conference. Uh, To outline it very clearly, Microsoft announced two specific new first-party titles. One is isn't a new IP, but it is a racing title. Unsurprisingly, it is Forza 5 Motorsport, which will be, I think, as I recall, they said it would be a launch title, and a new IP called Quantum Break from Alan Wake and Max Payne creator Remedy Entertainment. Now, what we know about these titles is first of all that Quantum Break mixes TV footage with gameplay, with the promise of the two interacting and changing depending on how you watch or play. Now, what exactly that is going to be like, or what exactly that experience is going to entail, that hasn't been detailed yet, so we can't speak to that. We were only served with a very short CGI trailer that mixed both live footage with CGI, so to speak. And Microsoft announced that all in all, there are 15 first-party games in the works, and that 8 of them were new IPs, the aforementioned IPs included. And of course, Microsoft has been very vocal, during the press conference and saying that it is investing more than it ever has in first-party development and has more titles in development than at any other time in its history. Now, we don't know if there are more titles in development or what exactly is the time frame for the release of these 15 first-party titles. We're still waiting on information.
I believe they said first. I believe they said it was within the first year, didn't they? Within the
Yeah,
first year of the system.
without any hard dates, it's always a gamble. We saw with the Nintendo Wii U launch what a launch window meant, and Rayman is still coming out in August. So launch windows are very flexible. So we'll wait until we have a actual confirmation on dates as far as that goes. And of course, EA unveiled 4 sports games at the event with their new Ignite engine, FIFA 14, Madden, NBA Live, and the new UFC game. And all are powered by the next gen engine, which will be exclusive to next gen consoles. So that will be both the Xbox One and the PS4. While they will be using their current engine for current generation games. And let's actually just start with those before we get into that last one. Going back a bit, of course, Forza 5 Motorsport, nothing that isn't exactly a new title, and I think it is safe to say that most people were expecting it. I think a lot of the sentiment that has come from people following the press conference comes from the fact that there were either no live demonstration of gameplay for any of the titles mentioned, or the fact that we weren't served with any gameplay either. There wasn't a gameplay trailer. It was all purely CGI for the most part. But let's start with them, from beginning to end. Forza 5, what were your immediate impressions, Kevin?
Well, it's a driving game. Yay.
But considering the span and of course,
It looked good. I know Forza is a very popular driving franchise. I know there's a lot of like hardcore driving fans that even prefer it to sort of industry standard Gran Turismo. So it looked nice. I've never had any interest in driving games, especially more sim based racing games. But it did look nice. Again, everything we saw no live demonstrations. We saw no demonstrations like we saw, it can't really help but keep comparing things back to the PS4 event, like we saw with that Killzone demo, where it was pretty indicative that it was sort of live gameplay. So it's tough to say whether it was CGI, whether they claimed everything that we saw was in engine and stuff like that. I will get back to that point again when we get to the EA one. But from what I saw, it looked good. The last Forza game on 360 looked very good and was received really well for what it was. It's a title that has no interest from me whatsoever. But Microsoft really doesn't have any strong IPs to pull from. I mean, they've got Halo, they got Forza, they got Gears, they've got Fable. That's kind of about it. So we knew one of the big Microsoft IPs was going to show up in some form. So it was good to see, that it's going to be. I would predict it's going to be a very good game for people excited by the Forza franchise. But for me, it's just driving. It's just another driving game.
Do you feel the same, Rourke?
Yeah, I'm not a racing man myself, but it was a lot shorter and a lot less awkward than the stilted car porn that Sony showed off at their conference. So for that, I was thankful. Yeah, just not a big fan of like cars. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I definitely share both of your sentiments of the fact that I am not personally a big racing game guy or a big car guy, so I know what you're talking about. And as Kevin said, I'll just reiterate what he said or echo his statements rather. I think that Forza is going to be a great racing game for those who like that. Like
Yeah.
racing games, just in the same way that Gran Turismo 6 is going to be a great racing game on the PS3 for people who like racing games. But other than that, I can't really speak to it. Of course, the next thing I mentioned before was Quantum Break, and that was of a bit of a different caliber as we saw it on stage. As I recall, we weren't told a lot about it other than the very short trailer that we were served that as I believe it started out with a little girl and what seemed like her family her turning to her mother and saying something and then touching her, and all of a sudden CGI footage enters the screen and we're served with a very large freight ship that kind of hammers straight into a bridge in
I can make Michael Bay films with my mind.
in a very very odd sequence. But of course that is at least I thought that was to be almost expected given Remedy Entertainment's inclinations for a bit of the supernatural following Alan Wake. But what were your impressions, Rourke?
I obviously not too much to say. I personally hate this type of media. I hate this type of trailer. Um, if this was a movie trailer, TV trailer, would have been fine. But this gives me fuck all about the game. Like this tells me nothing. It's like okay, it's a supernatural game. I do respect Remedy as a developer. I have not played Alan Wake, but I've seen the game played, and um, yeah, I mean, I do enjoy the work that comes out of that studio, but this trailer told me nothing and just felt completely pointless.
Would you agree with that, Kevin?
Well, I'm a big fan of Remedy, and it's good to see, I guess, that the giant raging hard on that they've got for Twin Peaks that was like readily apparent through Alan Wake hasn't gone away. Not that I'm saying that's a bad thing. Twin Peaks was awesome. I'm interested by this, and I'm not really surprised by this from Alan Wake because in Alan Wake they divided that game up sort of episodically. They really wanted it to feel like a serialized television show, like a television drama. In fact, even instituting like last time on Alan Wake and like through the various chapters that you play through. So this looks like a sort of an evolution of that kind of concept where they're trying to create a television series as a video game. And I really loved Alan Wake. Alan Wake I thought was a fantastic game. In fact, I just recently rebought it on PC so that I'm starting to play through it again now. So this was probably, out of all the stuff listed, the game I was most excited for, but they really didn't show much. I mean, I'm excited by the announcement. I'm excited that Remedy has another game coming out. I do question whether or not it's going to be an Xbox One exclusive. They talked about it being an exclusive, but with their previous title, Alan Wake, it was produced by Microsoft Game Studios. So it was a Microsoft exclusive, but it did come out on PC as well as on Xbox 360. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this come out on PC as well as the Xbox One.
Well, as I recall, it never came to Mac, so it's still go on the suspicion that it is
Well,
a
it's
Microsoft
Microsoft
exclusive.
exclusive, yeah. So
Yeah.
we may see this on the PC as well as the Xbox One, but yeah, no, I'm excited to see that Remedy's got another game coming out because I've been waiting. It's not Alan Wake 2, which I wanted, because American Wasteland was I didn't think was very good. So I was hoping Alan Wake 2. They brought this instead. I'm reserved, hoping that it's as good as their last game.
And
Cool.
and I bet a lot of the sports fans are saying the same thing about these new iterations that EA were talking about on stage: FIFA 14, Madden, NBA Live, and a new UFC game. And now I know, of course, that they didn't really show much in the same vein that that Remedy were present with their trailer. EA Sports were also present with their trailer in that it mixed a lot of what was seemingly in-game assets meshed with CGI, as well as live footage from interviews with certain players representing certain fields of sport. Uh, Now, of course, I assume this is to give an indicator on what is to come and the level and depth of strategy that this new generation of console, the Xbox One, is going to be able to give unto the player. But for me, I have to admit, I must echo both of your sentiments as far as the Quantum Break trailer, in that it didn't leave me here nor there, but gave me a very slight indication of a progression of both graphics and strategy and tactile depth. I don't know if you guys would agree with that.
Well, the footage montage they showed at the end was very apparent that it was a CGI trailer. And seeing the stuff that EA has shown us before in other press conferences over the last 7 or 8 years, I'm not surprised. I mean, even back, I think it was, I can't remember what year of E3 it was, but I went back and I watched some footage from an old press conference where they showed off like next generation, like Madden and stuff like that, and it was just pure CGI and just nothing even remotely close to what the actual games ended up looking like. So I don't believe for a second that any of the stuff in that last montage they showed was in game whatsoever. The footage they showed before that, they showed a bit of, you know, unfinished assets, or where, okay, why are you showing us that? That makes no sense. The little interviews, the little vignettes with the sports athletes from from the soccer player, the football player, the basketball player, and then John Bones Jones from UFC. We really didn't need that. That was just pointless fluff to cater to the casual audience that Microsoft were really focused on in this press conference specifically. So I don't play a lot of sports games. I play NHL, so I was very disappointed not to see NHL. I think the NHL franchise has consistently outsold the NBA franchise over the last few years. So, again, like Roark said before, very US focused. This is the new Xbox for the United States. The rest of us, all the rest of us in the world, we're gonna get our Xbox maybe sometime later. So seeing like 4 sports franchises I will not play, and seeing just not even showing the actual games themselves, I thought this entire long, drawn out little EA just wank fest from Andrew Wilson was just kind of a waste of our time.
I actually have to disagree. I think that what you said is right, that the unfinished assets, the CGI parts, didn't really show us much, but what they were actually promising within the trailer itself is what interested me, is that sort of human element that they're sort of hoping to bring to these titles, that full range of human motion, gets me indirectly excited to see this possibly implemented in other titles that aren't sports games. Obviously, EA is a huge company, and I don't think they would let something like this new engine just sit by and by. So yeah, I think this new engine, if we see more of it down the road, could have potential in not just these titles that they showed, but other EA titles as well. Hopefully, giving into their promises and bringing a full range of motion to these different characters that we play in a variety of different titles. So. And obviously, EA, like Xbox, is saving their big gaming guns, it appears, for the E3 conference. That's something that Microsoft heavily implied throughout this conference, was that they were saving a lot of that stuff for E3. And obviously, I think EA is doing the same thing as well. So I definitely see promise in this Ignite.
Well, hopefully it will ignite a new generation when come E3. But last but not least, one thing I did not disclose prior because it came as probably what was to be the most expected, but also to be the most unexpected. Now, Activision closed the reveal event with Eric Hirschberg coming out on stage, giving the public the first look at Call of Duty Ghosts with very little gameplay, but a very large view of in-game assets in kind of an overview of what Call of Duty Ghosts, as it's called, is going to be and how it is going to both look and feel on next generation consoles. Now, probably one of the biggest takeaways from this is that Microsoft and Activision have renewed their agreement for Xbox owners to get Call of Duty DLC and competition content first, which essentially makes the Xbox One what the Xbox 360 ended up being, which is being the primary place for you and your friends to play Call of Duty, in the sense that you will get content there first, which has proven to be I wouldn't say a winning strategy, but it certainly has proven to be a very effective strategy for Microsoft in linking that partnership with Activision. Now, we saw more than probably any other title with Call of Duty Ghosts, as we were served with this behind the scenes vignette. Now, I want to put it out to you before I get in with my own impressions. What were your expectations for Call of Duty Ghosts going in, and where did it leave you afterwards?
I don't know, it didn't go over too badly for me. I mean, Call of Duty is what it is, right? I think they definitely needed to update the engine for this next generation. Possibly for a lot of gamers, it will truly feel like the next generation has arrived because they finally updated this freaking engine. But it sounds like they're breaking up the mechanics of the game itself a little bit, adding in a slide, some lean stuff, and that sprinting momentum mechanic where you sort of leap over obstacles in your way.
That they totally didn't rip off from every other shooter that's out there lately.
Well, yeah, obviously that stuff is already in other games, but it hasn't been in Call of Duty, and I mean that's somewhat of a baby to like a lot of the players that play Call of Duty. I mean, they want to play that same game every year. That's why they keep buying it, and it'll be interesting to see how these new mechanics are met with the Call of Duty crowd. As well as the addition of dynamic maps, which, like Kevin said, has already been in tons of games, but it has not been in a Call of Duty. So it'll be interesting to see how that huge crowd responds to these changes. And you can also connect with your kill droid through new customization options.
One thing I have to interrupt you here because I forgot to mention it before. I also think that Call of Duty Ghosts could perhaps be the first next generation title announced that will actually feature full 60 frames per second gameplay. And I don't know whether or not that plays into the new engine having these new features as well, but it does make one think nonetheless. Just wanted to get that in there.
Well,
Cool. Yeah.
that's been. I think that's just kind of the Call of Duty tagline. That's even the Call of Duty games on 360. That was always Call of Duty 60 frames per second. That's like almost like it should say Call of Duty Ghosts 60 frames per second. Since they use that so much. Um,
But even so, not many console games run at 60 frames per
no,
second.
but
And with
like
this
the
being the
Sony
first
also
one
has said
announced,
this week that they're striving to have every game that they put out 60 frames per second as like the standard on that console.
but that's not even the standard for one of their launch titles. Killzone is being run at 30 frames per second.
Well, we don't also know what other launch titles there are or like how that again, now we're just getting back into speculation again anyways, but back to Call of Duty. I was a little bit surprised. I was actually kind of surprised that they pushed this hard on the next generation. I knew Ghosts would launch with the new Xbox, since the new Xbox is coming out this year. I expected a simple up-resing. Like I expected a similar experience to what we were going to get on the 360 version of it at the end of the year. So that was kind of a nice surprise. The fact that they're bringing in Stephen Guigan, who was the writer on Traffic and Syriana, and has been nominated for Academy Award for his writing. The fact that they're bringing him in to write the campaign story, that is a good point. Like, it was nice to see them going that far into trying to deliver a compelling story. The fact that they didn't announce it, but I have a strange feeling that Peter Molyneux must work over at Infinity Ward now, because they had such a big focus on putting a dog in it that's going to be your companion throughout the game, and you're supposed to have this wonderful connection with your dog. So clearly Peter Molyneux now works over at Infinity Ward. The other stuff they announced, this was finally this is the only game that they show game. Like, they didn't show gameplay, but I will give the Call of Duty series credit. They don't really rely on CGI or anything in their games. Typically, even like cutscenes and everything else, montage videos and that are all typically done with in-game assets, and they always have. So I fully believe that the assets that we showed, they showed us in the trailers and the bits that we saw, was all running on in-game engine stuff. So we finally actually got to see game assets that are probably game assets. The changes they've added, they ripped off the mantle from Battlefield. They ripped off the slide from Far Cry. They ripped off the lean out from countless other shooters, especially on the PC. It is nice that they're expanding the very safe Call of Duty style of shooting that has plagued the system plagued the franchise for the last 7 titles. So the fact that they are mixing it up a little bit is, I guess, kind of nice. Will I get it? No, probably not, because I've moved away from being a Call of Duty guy. I play Battlefield. I much prefer Battlefield. I still think the graphically the engine didn't look as good as the engine in the Battlefield 4 trailer. It was more colorful and had more variance to it in its settings, which was a little nicer. So I did get a good laugh though when they were doing the behind the scenes stuff at Infinity Ward, and they started comparing the Modern Warfare 3 assets to the new Ghost assets to show you the difference in quality, and how he was saying that Modern Warfare 3 was the sort of the current example of state of the art. I got a good solid laugh out of that.
Well, in that case, let me move on and get to my experiences, because I also want to talk a little about Call of Duty Ghosts before we run a little long here. But I was definitely impressed by as in the same vein that Kevin was impressed with how far they were pushing it as far as going next gen and actually doing something a little bit new. Although the post-apocalyptic, we are the last group of American soldiers left to defend
Homefront.
the nation is not exactly something new, and I guess it will definitely resonate with a core audience of people in America. Once again, we're talking about very Western oriented titles, but of course, Call of Duty has a certain mass appeal. One thing I'm really interested in is, since they put so much emphasis on the dog, what is that going to mean as far as AI, and how is that going to figure into what else the Xbox can do? Of course, one of the thing about dogs, if you have a trained dog, you will know that there's
Voice command.
all sorts of commands that you can use, and of course, voice commands instantly comes into my mind when that is brought up. But all in all, it looked very very interesting, very polished, and of course this was one of the first games that we saw, and one of the only games we saw where there were actual in-game assets that we can at least be to a degree certain of, and that we actually saw a few seconds of gameplay being played. We saw that slide functionality that Kevin was talking about, and saw a few other tidbits, and basically it looks very good. I would say it's of course not one that's personally on my radar, but I do understand the appeal there, and I do commend them for actually taking up the mantle of what is next gen and trying to pushing that in a slightly different direction. Of course, dogs have been featured in different extents in various games, so it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of emphasis they put on having an actual dog there. And with that being said, I actually think that more or less rounds up our Xbox One press event coverage. One thing I want to I've had throughout recording this, I've wanted to ask you, and I think it's very pertinent here at the end to kind of cover this, is I just want each of you to kind of give me your impression of whether or not the fact that PlayStation 4 was announced first and their press conference came first, whether or not that has then dictated the narrative of what it means to be next generation. What it means to be a next generation console, and what a next generation console is supposed to do in the mind share of the consumer. What do you think, Roark?
Well, I mean, after this conference, it definitely feels like the next generation is on the rise, and it's on the horizon, and I can see it, and it's
Yeah, but do you think
weird
do
and
you think that
beautiful. But
that Microsoft's conference like the light it was put in was overshadowed by the narrative that Sony had constructed with the PS4 conference?
yeah, I definitely think that's um, a possibility.
Because a lot of what is happening currently is we're comparing it to what PlayStation brought out. And
Right.
and do you think that would have changed necessarily if Xbox had gone first?
Um, I mean, they definitely updated their tactics, I imagine, in some way after the Sony conference, and took some notes. I'm sure from what came out of that whole event. I mean, that's business, right? So you adapt. So yeah, I definitely think Sony dictated the opening bouts of the next generation, as you will. And this is completely unrelated, but I think that the first periphery device for the Xbox is going to be a soundproof blackout box for your Kinect, so you can stop it from watching you.
And what do you think of whether or not the narrative that Sony has constructed severely impacted the Xbox press event, Kevin?
Well, I think Microsoft tried to do their best to stand out, and I think that they went the wrong way about it. Sony came out and showed us that the PlayStation 4 is very much a machine for gamers, and Microsoft came out and showed us the Xbox One is anything but that. So I think the problem, Microsoft trying to court all the people that Sony didn't really go for. Sony didn't go for the people the people that want to watch TV on their console and stuff like that. They went for the gamers. That was what they were focused on. And Microsoft decided, they're going to use this opportunity to go after everybody else, especially since they have a better foothold, especially in North America with those type of consumers. So right now, as it stands, the PS4 is for your hardcore gamers. The Xbox One is for your dude bros that that want to watch TV and play Madden. Um, that might change at
Right.
E3. But as a gamer going into E3, I feel that Sony has my best interests as a gamer at mind more so than Microsoft does, and that may change after the E3 press conferences. But as a gamer, I'm siding with Sony right now, and that is I don't. Microsoft has to do something pretty drastic to pull me away from that. Um, so I can see myself sticking with the Sony camp. I will buy a PS4. I will buy like PlayStation 4 games. I will get an Xbox One 2 or 3 years down the road because I buy every console. Once it goes down in price. But the problem is, you know, with today's market, the casual gamer and the casual, even non-gamer, there's more of them than us. We're far outnumbered. So Sony will do well with the gamers. I think Sony will be a far more gamer-centric company, as they kind of are now. Like more, they're sort of the company that has your back as a hardcore gamer. But Microsoft's going to sell more. They're going to do better financially. And 5 years from now, we're going to announce them as the winners of this console generation.
Before you get into a too long rant there, if I could just go back to the original question about the narrative that Sony has created. I think that Sony has definitely set an expectation that gamers expected. And that is, to me, also what is perhaps the saddest part of the perception that has been outlined from the PS4 going to the Xbox One conference, in the sense that what our industry is showing as far as independently developed games and what the expressions and ways of expressing emotion is coming through there, and how games can now appeal to a wider audience. I think it is very, very saddening, the fact that we are kind of going in a direction of saying it's either this or it's that. Whereas we've seen with this current generation of consoles that, if especially if you uh, look at how many units Microsoft and Sony have sold, they're borderline, heart to heart with each other. They're 77 million, 76 million. They're right there with each other. So I think there is a strong inclination to believe that there most people have an Xbox 360 and they have a PS3 if they are in a certain dedicated gamer camp. But I think there's a certain there's a certain openness lost when we start classifying it as being it's either this or it's that. And with the consoles going more multi-purpose in essence, I think more so than ever actually, that it is going to be, well, do I want this or do I want this? Because both of them most likely will be able to do everything, but which one will I choose? And that's where it essentially comes down to, what consumer are you courting? And that's where I can't help but feel that both companies will most likely try to court the same people, but in different ways. Whereas Sony had a very unfortunate outing with the PS3, in the sense that they lost a large sum of money on that project due to proprietary hardware and mismanagement. Um, Whereas Microsoft was a little bit more lucky in that sense, that they could, at least to a certain extent, coast through the current console generation. But I definitely hope that this new generation will see a bit more of an openness, both in terms of multi-platformism, as well as more of an open-natured narrative that will be able to be more of an inclusive variety than what we've been served with so far. Because I don't believe that I am a hardcore gamer, despite liking a particular subset of games. But if we can get games as ubiquitous as they are on the App Store or on the Android store and get everyone to play in an equal space with each other, I think will win as a community of gamers and not necessarily of a camp of Xbox fans or a camp of PlayStation fans or a clan of Nintendo stalwarts. So with that being said,
Huzzah!
with that being said, I hope for something great this generation. Now,
Well
I think
said.
we should probably end on this note with a couple of short statements. If you could sum up how how do you feel? Sum it up in one sentence leading up to E3, Kevin.
I think E3 is going to determine sort of the course of how these two companies do. I think E3 is the key right now to how this is going to go forward.
Roark, one sentence.
Yeah, the new console generation is finally here, and I hope the internet gets better because of it.
That would be an interesting development. And for my one sentence, I am to quote Shinji Hashimoto, please look forward to E3.
Yeah.
And with that being said, this was the 6th installment of Critical Mission. This has been all about the Xbox One, and we are over and out.
So let's all go buy Wii U's. Nintendo desperately needs the help.
Oh God, I can't wait to. I'm kind of fearing what they're gonna get in numbers.
If Nintendo plays their cards right, they win this Christmas, like by a landslide, by a goddamn landslide.
I think that may be hoping a little too much.
The second a Mario Kart comes out, the second a Mario game that is not shitty new Super Mario Bros. Comes out, systems will sell. Like, they will fly off the shelves as fast as people can buy them.